Chapter 1. Chasing Shadows. On all 2,658 hours of secretly recorded Nixon White House tapes that the government has declassified to date, you can hear the President of the United States order precisely one break-in. It wasn't Watergate, but it does expose the roots of the cover-up that ultimately brought down Richard Milhous Nixon. Investigation of its origin reveals almost as much about the president's rise as his fall. June 17th, 1971, 5:15 p.m., the Oval Office. None of the president's men knew what to do when he ordered them to burglarize the Brookings Institution, a venerable Washington think tank. Richard Nixon had gathered his inner circle to talk about something entirely different. The recent leak of the Pentagon Papers, at that point the biggest unauthorized disclosure of classified information in U.S. history. The 7,000-page Defense Department history of Vietnam decision-making during the administrations of Harry S. Truman, Dwight D. Eisenhower, John F. Kennedy, and Lyndon B. Johnson had nothing on President Nixon. The study stopped well before his election, climaxing with LBJ's surprise, March 31st, 1968, announcement that he would not seek a second full term. In that same speech, Johnson created the issue that nearly sank Nixon's presidential campaign. LBJ announced that he was limiting American bombing of North Vietnam and would stop it completely if Hanoi could convince him that this would lead to prompt, productive peace talks. Throughout the fall campaign, Nixon worried that LBJ would announce a bombing halt before Election Day, a move that would boost the Democratic nominee, Vice President Hubert Humphrey. Johnson did, and it did. The president announced the bombing halt on Halloween, less than a week before the voting. The Republican nominee, who had begun the campaign 16 points ahead in the polls, watched his lead disappear. Nixon still won, but it was too close. At that point, the second closest race of the 20th century, right behind the one he had lost in 1960 to JFK.
You could blackmail Johnson on this stuff, and it might be worth doing,
said White House Chief of Staff H.R. Haldeman, a California public relations executive with blue eyes and a brush cut, who spent years polishing Walt Disney's image before taking on the greater challenge of managing Nixon's.
How?
The president asked.
The bombing halt stuff is all in the same file. Houston swears to God there's a file on it at Brookings.
Haldeman was working with some bad information. Tom Charles Houston, author of the secret Houston plan to expand government break-ins, wiretaps, and mail opening in the name of fighting domestic terror, claimed Brookings had a top-secret report on the bombing halt, written under the direction of some of the same people who oversaw the Pentagon Papers project.
Bob, now you remember Houston's plan? Implement it.
An aide began to object.
I mean, I want it implemented on a thievery basis. God damn it, get in and get those files. Blow the safe and get it.
This wasn't what Haldeman had in mind. He wanted government officials to visit Brookings on the pretext of inspecting how it stored classified material and to confiscate the bombing halt file in the process. No one in the Oval Office pointed out that the president's idea was illegal. National Security Advisor Henry Kissinger, a former Harvard government professor with a profound German accent, asked the obvious question.
But what good would it do you? The bombing halt file.
To blackmail him, because he used the bombing halt for political purposes.
The bombing halt file would really kill Johnson.
Why? Why do you think that?
Kissinger asked.
The timing of the whole thing. Johnson stopped the bombing less than a week before the election.
You remember, I used to give you information about it at the time.
Kissinger said, reminding them of the secret role he had played as an informant to the 1968 Nixon campaign on Johnson's bombing halt negotiations. Henry had worked as a consultant on a 1967 bombing halt initiative for LBJ, so when he visited the American negotiating team in Paris during the 1968 talks, members confided in him. He gained Nixon's trust by betraying theirs.
To the best of my knowledge, there was never any conversation in which they said we'll hold it until the end of October. I wasn't in on the discussions here. I just saw the instructions to Harriman.
Years later, Kissinger denied having had access to information about the negotiations at the time. The instructions to Ambassador Harriman, LBJ's lead negotiator with the North Vietnamese, were of course highly classified information. If Kissinger was right, then even if Nixon got someone to break into Brookings and steal the bombing halt report, it was unlikely to contain the blackmail information he said he wanted. Yet Nixon ordered the Brookings burglary at least 3 more times in the next 2 weeks. It was one of the reasons he took the fateful step of creating the Special Investigations Unit, an unconstitutional secret police organization better known as the Plumbers, because one of its jobs was to plug leaks. The SIU recruited a former FBI agent with experience doing black bag jobs, That is, government-conducted break-ins, and a former CIA agent experienced in covert operations. Exactly 1 year to the day after Nixon first ordered the Brookings break-in, a different one planned by these two former government agents took place at Democratic National Committee headquarters in Washington's Watergate apartment and office complex. Once Washington, D.C., police arrested 5 men in dark suits and blue gloves at the DNC offices on the morning of June 17, 1972. President Nixon faced a stark choice: an unobstructed investigation of the crimes the two former government agents had committed would lead back to ones that the president himself had ordered. He could either order a cover-up or face impeachment. So why did Nixon want the bombing halt files so badly in the first place? What good would blackmailing LBJ do anyway? At that point, Nixon just wanted the former president to hold a press conference denouncing the leak of the Pentagon Papers, not much of a motive to commit a felony. The potential downside was enormous: impeachment, conviction, prison, disgrace, and the upside was questionable at best. If Nixon were the kind of president to conduct criminal fishing expeditions for dirt on his predecessors, his tapes would be littered with break-in orders. But Brookings is the only one. There is a rational explanation. Nixon did have reason to believe that the bombing halt file contained politically explosive information, not about his predecessor, but about himself. Ordering the Brookings break-in wasn't a matter of opportunism or poor presidential impulse control. As far as Nixon knew, it was a matter of survival. The reasons why are not on Nixon's tapes, but on those of his predecessor.